Welcome to Soft Sleep Tales, a place where timeless stories, gentle narration, and quiet atmospheres guide you toward rest. Before tonight's story begins, you are warmly invited to share where you are listening from in the comments below. It is always a comfort to see this quiet community reaching across the world night by night. And if these stories bring you a sense of calm, you are welcome to subscribe and join us on these peaceful journeys. Now, take a moment to get comfortable. Settle into your bed or your favorite chair. Gently close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and allow the day to soften and fade. Let my voice carry you quietly into sleep, to a place where imagination drifts and rest comes naturally. The order always came on the first Monday of December. Nora Ellison had worked in the shop long enough to know this the way she knew other fixed things. The way the afternoon light fell through the front window in January. The way the chrysanthemums needed more water in the heated air of November. The way the bell above the door sounded different in cold weather than in warm. Slightly flatter, slightly more certain of itself, as though the cold gave it something to push against. She had been expecting it since the 1st of December. This was the 4th. She was behind the counter, sorting the morning delivery hothouse roses from the wholesaler. White, very good quality, the petals tight and perfect when she heard the particular sound of an envelope being pushed through the letterbox. Not the bell, just the letterbox. The order always came that way. Not in person, not by telephone, but by envelope. A small cream envelope, the same every year, with the same handwriting on the front. She did not hurry. She finished sorting the roses. 12 stems to a bunch, the way her mother had always done it, which was the way Nora did everything in this shop. Then she dried her hands on the cloth she kept on the hook below the counter and went to the door and picked up the envelope. The handwriting was the same as it had always been. Small and very even, the letters slightly compressed. The kind of handwriting that suggested the writer had been taught that penmanship was a serious matter and had taken the lesson to heart. The envelope addressed to the shop Ellison's Flowers, Marchpane Lane, London, and in the bottom left corner, as always, the sender, E. Hartley. Nora stood at the door with the envelope and looked at it for a moment. Outside, the December morning was doing what December mornings in London did, pressing its grey weight against everything, turning the narrow lane into a study in charcoal and stone. The butcher across the way had his lights on already, the warm yellow of them making a small square of amber on the wet pavement. A woman walked past with her coat pulled close, a boy with a basket. The ordinary morning of an ordinary street in winter. She opened the envelope. Inside, a single card, the same cream paper as the envelope, the same small, even handwriting, the same order, written out in full as though it were being placed for the first time. White roses, winter hyacinth, yellow mimosa, for E. Hartley, 14 Calloway Street, Clerkenwell, to be delivered at the earliest convenience. And at the bottom, as always, in the same small hand, "Thank you for your continued care." Nora read it and then set it on the counter beside the roses. She went to the back room where she kept the order book, a large ledger, dark green, going back to her mother's time, and found the tab she used for this particular order. The tab she had placed there 23 years ago when she first took over the shop. The tab was thick with paper, 23 slips, one for each year, each one recording the same information: the order received, the arrangement made, the delivery attempted, and, beside each delivery, in Nora's own hand, the same note. No such address. She had looked for Calloway Street in Clerkenwell in the first year, thoroughly, the way she did everything methodically, without shortcuts. She had walked Clerkenwell on a cold December afternoon, starting at one end and working her way through every lane and court and passage she could find. She had asked at the post office. She had consulted the street directories her mother kept on the shelf in the back room. She had found Calloway Court, Calloway Passage, a Calloway Mews that had been converted and renamed, but no Calloway Street. Not in Clerkenwell, not anywhere near it. In the second year she had tried again, less thoroughly. In the third year she had simply made the arrangement and set it in the window on the delivery date and waited to see what happened. Nothing had happened. At closing time she had taken it apart and put the flowers back in their buckets and recorded the failed delivery in her ledger and thought no more about it until the following December. 23 years of this. She had wondered, in the early years, whether she ought to write back, whether she ought to send a letter to the return address, but there was no return address, only the name in the corner. E. Hartley. She had not resolved it. Something about the order resisted being resolved. The same handwriting every year, the same flowers, the same formal little note at the bottom. Thank you for your continued care. There was something in the continued care that stopped her, as though E. Hartley knew, somehow, that the care was being taken, that the arrangement was being made, year after year, even when it could not be delivered, as though the making of it was the point. She went back to the counter and picked up the card and read it again. White roses, winter hyacinth, yellow mimosa. The shop was her mother's before it was hers. Margaret Ellison had opened Ellison's Flowers in 1951, in the same narrow premises on Marchpane Lane, in the same building with the same bow window and the same dark green paintwork that Nora had repainted twice since taking over, but always the same shade, because some things were not worth changing. Her mother had run it for 40 years before her arthritis made the cold work of the buckets impossible. She had handed the keys to Nora with the particular matter-of-factness of a woman who does not make more of a moment than it requires. The keys, the ledger, the order book, and the tab in the order book, which had been there before Nora. She had noticed this in the first year. The tab was not new when she placed her first slip in it. Her mother's handwriting was already there, slips going back years before the handover, each one recording the same. Order received, arrangement made, delivery attempted, no such address. She had counted them once. Her mother's slips numbered 31, 31 years before Nora, and 23 since. 54 Decembers. 54 envelopes in the same handwriting, with the same flowers, to the same impossible address. She went to the flower buckets. She selected the roses first, the best 12 from the morning delivery, the ones whose petals were most perfectly formed, whose stems were straightest. Then to the cooler at the back, for the winter hyacinth pale blue, the colour of early morning, the smell of them clean and cold and slightly sweet, and finally the mimosa, which she kept specially for this order, which arrived from the south of France in small, careful bundles and smelled of somewhere much warmer than London in December. She brought everything to the workbench. She began. Working with flowers was the thing she understood best in the world, not because she had studied it or theorized about it, but because she had been doing it since she was small enough to stand on a box to reach the workbench. handing her mother stems and watching how her mother's hands moved through the material with a sureness that was not speed but precision, the knowledge of where each thing went before it went there. She worked the E. Hartley order with more care than she gave to most. She could not have said why, entirely. The order would not be delivered. It never was. It would sit in the window for the day, and then she would take it apart at closing time. The care she was taking was entirely without practical purpose. And yet, she took it. The roses first, stripped and cut at an angle, placed with the spacing that allowed each one its full presence. The hyacinth threaded through, not arranged exactly, more allowed. The way hyacinth wanted to move was its own affair. Her job was simply to not prevent it. And the mimosa last, the yellow of it very bright against the white and the blue. The kind of brightness that had no business being in a London December and was all the more itself for that. She stood back and looked at what she had made. It was very good, one of the best she had made for this order, and she had made it 54 times. She carried it to the window and set it in the place she always set it, the left side of the display where the morning light would find it first. Then she went back behind the counter and opened the ledger to the current year and wrote the date and the order details and left the delivery line blank for now. She made her tea. She sat on the stool behind the counter and looked at the arrangement in the window and thought about E. Hartley, as she did every year, the question she had never answered, the address that did not exist. The handwriting that had been writing the same thing for longer than she had been alive. She closed the shop at 6. The December dark had come in at 4. It always did. The particular London darkness of December that turned the gas lamps into small warm islands and made the streets between them feel deeper than they actually were. Nora locked the door and turned off the main lights and stood for a moment in the near dark of the shop. Only the small lamp behind the counter burning, the flowers in their buckets, the arrangement in the window just visible in the lamplight, the smell of the shop in the evening different from the morning smell, the cold air of the day having settled into the warmth of the space and taken on something of everything that had been in it. She went to the back room. She opened the ledger and took out the tab. 54 slips, her mother's 31 and her own 23. She spread them on the workbench and looked at them in the lamp's warm circle. She looked at her mother's earliest slip, December 1958, the first year, and beside the delivery note in her mother's hand, no such address, but the flowers were very good this year. I hope whoever receives them will find them so. Nora read this and sat very still. She had not read the slips carefully before. She had simply used them for the count. But her mother had added a note to the first one, when presumably the mystery had been freshest, when presumably her mother had felt the same impulse Nora felt every December. I hope whoever receives them will find them so. She went through the other slips. Occasionally, perhaps 1 in 5, a brief addition from her mother. December 1962. The mimosa was exceptional this year. I ordered extra. December 1969. The hyacinth was slow this year. I substituted snowdrops. I hope E. Hartley does not mind. December 1974. 20 years now. I have stopped trying to find Calloway Street. I think perhaps it is not the point. Nora set the slips down. I think perhaps it is not the point. She thought about her mother writing that. About 20 years of December envelopes. About the conclusion her mother had arrived at quietly. without drama, that the finding was not the point. She thought about what the point was. Then she looked at the arrangement in the window, just visible from the back room doorway, the white of the roses, the pale blue of the hyacinth, the yellow of the mimosa. Very good. One of the best she had made. She thought about continued care, about what it meant to care for something for 54 years, to make the arrangement every year, to make it well, to stand it in the window, to record it in the ledger, to do this year after year without an answer and without requiring one. She gathered the slips and replaced them in the tab and closed the ledger. She put on her coat. She turned off the lamp. At the door she paused and looked back at the shop in the darkness, the flowers in their buckets, the arrangement in the window catching the last of the lamplight from the street outside. She thought, tomorrow I will look at what my mother did not look at. She went out into the December night and locked the door behind her. The arrangement stayed in the window. White roses in the dark, winter hyacinth, yellow mimosa, patient as flowers are patient, which is to say entirely. The street directories were on the bottom shelf in the back room. 7 of them, each one a different decade. The oldest going back to the 1880s, its spine cracked and its pages soft with age. The newest from 1960, the year her mother had stopped updating the collection. They stood in a row in the particular way of books that have been consulted regularly over a long period, not worn out, but worn in. The spines slightly faded where the light had reached them, the edges of the pages softened by decades of being turned. Nora had looked at them every December. She had taken them down, turned the pages to the relevant sections, run her finger along the columns of street names. Calloway, Calloway. Every year the same result. Calloway Court, Calloway Passage. Once, in the oldest directory, a Calloway Row that had been demolished before the turn of the century. But never a Calloway Street. Not in any of the directories. Not in Clerkenwell. Not anywhere in the index. This morning she did something she had not done before. She took all 7 directories to the workbench and opened them side by side. Not looking for Calloway Street, looking at what surrounded the place where Calloway Street should have been, the streets that bordered the gap in the alphabet, the streets that would have been neighbours to Calloway Street if Calloway Street had existed. She spread the oldest directory open to the C section for Clerkenwell. Her finger moved down the column. Calvert Street, Camden Passage, Canning Lane, the streets that preceded the gap, and after Chandler's Court, Chapel Row, Charles Street, the streets that followed. She opened the next directory, the same section, the same surrounding streets, the gap in exactly the same place, and the next, and the next. In the 5th directory, 1932, she found it. Not Calloway Street, not the street itself, but a footnote in the margin of the Clerkenwell section. Very small, in print so fine, she needed to carry the book to the window for the light. A single line, Calloway Street, formerly so called, now incorporated into Canning Lane. See Canning Lane. Nora stood at the window with the directory and read the line again. And again, Calloway Street, formerly so called, incorporated into Canning Lane. The street had existed. It had simply been absorbed, renamed, folded into the street beside it at some point before 1932, the buildings still standing, presumably, the people still living there, presumably, but the name gone, and with it, in every subsequent directory, any trace that Calloway Street had ever been. She looked up Canning Lane. The entry was brief. A short street off Clerkenwell Road, residential, some commercial premises at the northern end. No number 14 listed specifically. The directory was not that detailed, but the street was real, was there, was walkable. She set the directory down and looked out of the back room window at the small yard behind the shop. The cold morning light, the stone flags wet from last night's frost, a potted bay tree she had forgotten to bring in, its leaves very dark and still. She thought about Calloway Street, about a street that had been there and then had not been there, about whoever lived at number 14 and had been receiving or sending an order for white roses and winter hyacinth and yellow mimosa every December for as long as Nora's mother could remember and longer. She thought, I should go. She thought it simply, the way you think things that have been obvious for a long time and have only now been said. She opened the shop at 8 as usual. The morning was the kind of December morning that could not quite commit to either rain or frost and had settled on a grey compromise that was worse than either. The lane outside wet and very still. The butcher setting out his board. The lamplight still on at 9 o'clock because the day had not brightened sufficiently to make it unnecessary. Nora worked the morning steadily. 3 orders to arrange for collection. A delivery of freesias that needed sorting and conditioning. A woman who came in for something for her mother and spent 20 minutes deciding between 2 things before choosing neither and promising to return. A man who came in for something for his wife and chose immediately and left quickly. The ordinary morning of a flower shop in December, which was not ordinary at all because nothing about December was ordinary, the volume of orders, the quality of the available stock, the particular light through the bow window that made everything in the shop look as though it were being seen through water. She kept glancing at the arrangement in the left side of the window. The E. Hartley order, white roses, winter hyacinth, yellow mimosa, still very good. The roses beginning to open very slightly, she liked this stage, the transition from the perfect tightness of the bud to the first reluctant loosening. The hyacinth absolutely still. The mimosa catching whatever grey light came through the window and giving it back golden. At noon, she put the sign to back shortly. She put on her coat and her scarf and her gloves. She took the directory with the footnote. She walked to Clerkenwell. Canning Lane was exactly as the directory described. A short street off Clerkenwell Road, perhaps 100 yards long, running between 2 slightly larger streets, with the modest purposefulness of a lane that has always been there and has no particular ambitions. Residential on both sides, Victorian terraces, the brick dark with years of London soot, the windows small and the doors close together in the way of streets built for people rather than for space. At the northern end, as described, 2 or 3 commercial premises, a locksmith, something that might have been a bookbinder, a door with no sign. Nora walked the length of it slowly, looking at the numbers. The house is numbered in the ordinary way, odd on the left, even on the right. She found the even side, walked it from the bottom. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. She stopped. Number 14, Canning Lane, formerly number 14. Calloway Street was a Victorian terrace house, the same as its neighbours. Dark brick, a small step up to the front door, a window on either side of the door, both with net curtains. A pot on the step containing something that might once have been a plant. The door painted dark blue, slightly worn at the edges. A brass knocker. Nora stood on the pavement and looked at it. The house looked inhabited, not obviously or energetically inhabited. The curtains were still. No sound came from within. The step was swept, but not recently, but inhabited. The particular quality of a house that has a person in it, as opposed to a house that does not. The difference between a held breath and no breath at all. She thought about knocking. She stood on the pavement in the December cold and thought about knocking, and thought about what she would say if someone answered. "Hello, I am the florist from Marchpane Lane, and I have been trying to deliver your flowers for 23 years. Hello, my mother tried to deliver your flowers for 31 years before me, and I am now trying to deliver them too. Hello, do you know that your order has been coming to us every December for 54 years? She thought about Hartley opening the door. An old person, she imagined. Very old, if they had been sending this order since the 1950s, or perhaps not the original sender, perhaps a daughter, a granddaughter. The name passed down, along with the custom, the way the order book had passed from her mother to her. Two families, on opposite sides of London, each one continuing something they had inherited without quite knowing why. She raised her hand toward the knocker, and then she lowered it. She was not certain she could have said why. Something about the house and the still curtains and the particular quality of the grey December afternoon. Something about 54 years of an arrangement that had worked, that had done whatever it was supposed to do precisely because it had not been resolved. Her mother's voice in the slip from 1974. "I think perhaps it is not the point." She stood for a moment longer, looking at number 14, at the dark blue door and the brass knocker and the pot on the step and the net curtains and the small window to the left where something, a lamp, perhaps gave the glass a very faint warmth from within. Then she turned and walked back down Canning Lane, back toward Clerkenwell Road, back toward Marchpane Lane and the shop and the arrangement in the window and the tab in the order book with its 54 slips. She was back behind the counter by 1:30. She made tea. She stood at the counter and drank it and looked at the Hartley arrangement in the window. The roses open a little further now. The hyacinth beginning to release its smell into the warm air of the shop, the particular smell of winter hyacinth that was clean and cold and slightly sweet, and that always, without fail, made her think of December. A customer came in, then another, then a telephone order. The afternoon did its work, and she did hers, and the shop was what it was, warm and fragrant, and full of the particular busyness of a London flower shop in the weeks before Christmas. At 4:00, when the light was going and she had turned the lamps on and the shop had taken on its evening quality, she went to the back room and took out a piece of paper and her pen. She thought for a moment, then she wrote, "Dear Hartley, I am Nora Ellison of Ellison's Flowers, Marchpane Lane. My mother was Margaret Ellison, who ran this shop before me. We have been receiving your December order for as long as either of us can remember, and making the arrangement with care each year, and attempting the delivery each year, and finding ourselves unable to complete it. I found Canning Lane today. I found the house. I stood outside and I did not knock. I am not certain I can explain why, only that it seemed to me that the arrangement had been doing what it was supposed to do already for a very long time without the delivery. I intend to keep making it, as my mother did before me, with the same care." She paused. Then she wrote one more line. "The flowers this year are very good." She folded the letter. She addressed it to Hartley, 14 Canning Lane, Clerkenwell. She set it on the workbench. She did not know whether she would send it. She thought perhaps she would not. Perhaps the writing of it was enough. Perhaps that was what her mother had understood, that certain things needed to be said somewhere, even if that somewhere was a piece of paper on a workbench in the back room of a flower shop on a December evening. She closed the shop at 6. At the door she paused, as she always did, and looked back at the shop in the near dark, the flowers in their buckets, the E. Hartley arrangement in the window, the roses fully open now, not past their best, simply open. At the point between the bud and the full bloom, where they were most themselves, she thought about number 14 Canning Lane, about the dark blue door and the faint warmth behind the net curtain, about whoever was in there, in the December evening, in the warm interior of a house on a street that used to have a different name. She thought, they are there. She thought, the flowers are here. She thought, perhaps that is enough. She locked the door. She walked home through the December dark, the gas lamps doing their work, the streets quiet at this hour, the cold very clean and very still. And behind her on Marchpane Lane, in the bow window of the shop, white roses, fully open, winter hyacinth, beginning to breathe, yellow mimosa, holding its colour in the dark, for E. Hartley, who was there, as they had always been there, as the flowers had always been here. The letter came back on a Thursday, not returned, not marked undeliverable or addressee unknown, simply answered. A cream envelope in the letterbox on Thursday morning, the same cream as the December orders, the same small, even handwriting on the front. Addressed to Nora, Ellison. Ellison's Flowers, Marchpane Lane. Nora found it when she opened the shop at 8. She stood at the door with it in her hands for a moment, the Thursday morning doing what it did, grey and cold, and committed to neither one thing nor the other. The lane outside empty at this hour, except for the boy from the bakery dragging something around the back. The delivery van further down, its engine running. The ordinary sounds of a London street beginning its day. She went behind the counter. She made her tea first. This surprised her. She had not planned to make the tea first. Her hands had simply done it, moving through the familiar motions of kettle and cup and the particular drawer where she kept the tea while the envelope sat on the counter beside her, as though her hands understood that some things required the preparation of ordinary things before they could be approached. She sat on her stool with the tea. She opened the envelope. Inside, a single sheet of the same cream paper, the same handwriting, the small, even compressed letters she had been reading once a year for 23 years. Up close now, rather than on a card across a counter, the handwriting had a quality she had not noticed before, a slight tremor in certain letters. Not the tremor of illness exactly, more the tremor of great age, the hand of someone for whom writing had become an effort and who made the effort anyway, carefully, because they considered it worth making. She read, "Dear Miss Ellison, thank you for your letter. I have been hoping for some years that someone would write. Your mother was a good florist, and I believe you are too. The flowers are always right. They have always been right, which is why I have continued to send the order. You asked without asking. I could feel the question beneath your letter, and so I will try to answer it, though I am not certain I can do so entirely. My name is Eleanor Hartley. I am 81 years old. I have lived at this address for 60 years. The order is not mine originally, it was my mother's, who lived here before me and who began sending it to your mother's shop in the year I was born. I continued it after she died because it seemed to me that some things deserved to be continued. That is all the explanation I have. Some things deserve to be continued." The flowers are for the house, not for a person in it, for the house itself. This is what my mother told me, and I believe she was right. A house that has white roses and winter hyacinth and yellow mimosa sent to it every December is a different kind of house from one that does not. I cannot explain this better than that. I have never been good at explaining things that are true but difficult. I leave that to people who are better at it than I am. I am glad you found the lane. I am glad you did not knock. You were right not to. The knowing is sufficient. The not disturbing is also sufficient. Both things can be true. Please continue the order. When I am gone, there will be someone else. There always has been. Yours sincerely, Eleanor Hartley. Nora read the letter twice, then a third time. Then she set it on the counter and looked at the E. Hartley arrangement in the window, still there, still good, the roses fully open now, but not past. She thought about Eleanor Hartley, 81 years old, 60 years at the same address. Her mother's custom continued because some things deserve to be continued. She thought about the flowers being for the house, not for a person, for the house itself. She thought she understood this. She was not certain she could have explained it to anyone who had not spent 30 years in a flower shop. But she understood it, the way certain flowers change the quality of a space simply by being in it, not decoratively, something more than that. The way the smell of hyacinth in a room in December was not simply a smell but a kind of presence. The way white roses on a table on a grey morning altered the morning. The way mimosa, yellow and impossible, made a case for something being possible. She looked at the arrangement. She wrote back that afternoon, at the workbench, between orders, in the quiet hour when the shop had a particular stillness, not empty, simply resting. The flowers in their buckets, the lamplight, the smell of the shop at 3 o'clock in December. Dear Miss Hartley, thank you for your letter. I understand about the house. I have been a florist for 30 years, and I think I have always understood it without having the words for it. You have given me the words. I am grateful for that. I will continue the order. It has never been any trouble to make it. The trouble, such as it was only in not knowing. And now I know enough. I think perhaps my mother knew enough too, by the end. I think 1974 was the year she stopped needing to know the rest. I am glad you are there. I am glad the house has what it needs. She paused. Then she wrote, the mimosa this year is from the south of France. It arrived in good condition. I think it is some of the best I have had. She folded the letter, addressed it, set it with the outgoing post. Then she went back to the counter and served the afternoon customers and closed the shop at 6 and went home through the December dark and slept well. Another letter came on Monday. She had not expected a reply so soon. She had not, if she was honest, been certain there would be another reply at all. Eleanor Hartley had said what she needed to say, and Nora had said what she needed to say, and perhaps that was the correspondence completed. But there it was in the letterbox on Monday morning. The cream envelope, the small, even hand. She opened it with her tea. Dear Miss Ellison, I am pleased about the mimosa. My mother always said the mimosa was the most important part. I am not certain I agree. I think the hyacinth is the most important part, but we were not required to agree on everything. That is one of the advantages of a correspondence that has never been conducted in person. I should tell you something about my mother, since you are the first person to have asked, indirectly, in 54 years. Her name was Frances Hartley. She was a practical woman not given to sentiment or elaboration. She started the order the year I was born, which was also the year your mother opened the shop, which perhaps explains something about why she chose it. New things finding each other in a city, the way new things do. She said she wanted the house to know that the year had something worth marking in it. A new shop on Marchpane Lane, a new person at Calloway Street, white roses for the new, winter hyacinth for the cold beauty of the season, yellow mimosa for the south, for warmth, for the reminder that warmth exists even in December. She continued it every year after that because it had worked the first time and she saw no reason to stop. I continued it after her for the same reason. Some arguments are complete in themselves. I hope you are keeping warm. December in London is not forgiving. Yours sincerely, Eleanor Hartley. Nora sat with the letter and thought about Frances Hartley, a practical woman, not given to sentiment, who had started a December flower order the year her daughter was born because she wanted the house to know the year had something worth marking. White roses for the new, winter hyacinth for the cold beauty of the season, yellow mimosa for the reminder that warmth exists. She thought about her own mother, Margaret Ellison, who had received the first envelope in 1958 and had made the arrangement carefully and written in the slip, "I hope whoever receives them will find them so," who had stopped trying to find Calloway Street by 1974, who had understood, somehow, that the not finding was correct, that the making and the not delivering was itself sufficient. Two practical women on opposite sides of London, each one doing something that looked, from the outside, like an unresolved thing, and each one understanding, in her own way and in her own time, that it was not unresolved at all, that it was exactly as resolved as it needed to be. She looked at the arrangement in the window. Still there. The roses past their best, now the petals beginning to loosen very slightly at the edges, the way roses did, giving back what they had been given. The hyacinth at its peak, the mimosa unchanged, as mimosa always was. She thought about the house at number 14 Canning Lane, about Eleanor Hartley, 81 years old, in the warm interior behind the net curtains, about the flowers that had been ordered for that house every December for 54 years and had never arrived, and had perhaps arrived anyway, in some form, in the form of someone making them carefully, year after year, because they deserved to be made carefully. She thought, perhaps that is how flowers work. She thought, perhaps that is how most things work. She replied that afternoon, "Dear Miss Hartley, I agree about the hyacinth, though I think your mother was not wrong about the mimosa either. They are doing different things. The hyacinth is doing the work of presence. The mimosa is doing the work of reminder. Both are necessary. I have been thinking about what your mother said about the house knowing. I think she was right. And I think I have always known she was right, even when I did not know who she was. I have been making this arrangement for 23 years, and my mother made it for 31 years before me, and I think both of us made it a little better than our other arrangements because of that knowing. The care that goes into something you believe in is a different kind of care. You can feel it in the finished thing. I am keeping warm. The shop helps. Flowers require a certain temperature, and so the back room is always the warmest room I know." She paused. Then she added, "I should tell you something about my mother too, since you told me about yours. Her name was Margaret. She was also a practical woman not given to sentiment, as you say, of yours. She would have found this correspondence surprising and probably unnecessary. and she would have continued the order without it, as she did for 31 years. I think that is the best thing I can say about her, that she did things because they were right without needing to understand why they were right. I am trying to learn to do the same. She folded the letter, set it with the post. Then she looked at the arrangement in the window for a long moment, the roses loosening, the hyacinth perfect, the mimosa steady, and felt something she had not felt in a long time in this shop. Not happiness exactly, something quieter. The feeling of a thing being in its right place. The feeling of understanding, finally, what the care had always been for. The last letter of the week came on Friday. Very short this time, a single paragraph in the small trembling hand. Dear Miss Ellison, your mother sounds like a woman worth knowing. So, I think, do you? I shall look forward to next December. In the meantime, please take good care of the shop. It matters more than you perhaps know. Such places always do. Yours sincerely, Eleanor Hartley. Nora read it standing at the counter with the morning around her. The lamplight, the flowers in their buckets, the bow window with its December light. She thought about such places always do, about what Eleanor Hartley meant by it, about a flower shop on a narrow London lane that had been here since 1951 and had sent the same arrangement to the same house every December for 54 years without understanding why and without requiring understanding about the particular kind of mattering that did not announce itself. That simply continued, season after season, order after order, arrangement after arrangement. She set the letter beside the others on the workbench. 4 letters in a week, from someone she had never met, from someone she had been making flowers for, unknowingly, for 23 years. From someone her mother had been making flowers for, unknowingly, for 31 years before that. She went to the window. The E. Hartley arrangement was at the end of its time now, the roses very open, the petals beginning to fall when she touched them, the hyacinth still good but beginning to fade, the mimosa the same as it had always been, as mimosa always was, unchanged, certain, yellow. She took it down carefully. She carried it to the workbench. She began, gently, to take it apart. The roses first, the petals falling as she worked, soft and white on the dark surface of the bench. She gathered them. She did not throw them away. She set them in a small bowl of water, the way her mother had taught her. Rose petals in water kept something, not the flower, not exactly, but the idea of the flower, the suggestion of it. A week of white in a bowl of water in the back room of a flower shop. The hyacinth stems back in their bucket. The mimosa the same. Each one returned to its place. Each one still good, still useful, still with work to do. She washed the vase, dried it, set it on the shelf where she kept the good vases. She opened the ledger to the current year's entry. She found the delivery line, still blank. She picked up her pen. She wrote, "Delivered." Then she closed the ledger, set it back on the shelf, stood for a moment in the warm back room with the smell of the shop around her and the rose petals in their bowl and the afternoon light doing what December light did. She thought, "It was always delivered," she thought. "We simply did not know how to write it down until now." December continued its work. The way December always did in a flower shop, with a particular intensity that was not frantic but relentless. Order after order, arrangement after arrangement. The wholesaler deliveries coming every other morning now instead of twice a week. The buckets full and then empty and then full again. The bow window changing every 2 days as the displays moved through their lives and were replaced. The bell above the door sounding almost continuously between 10 and 4. Nora moved through it all the way she always moved through the December rush. Steadily, without hurrying, the knowledge of 30 years behind every decision, which stem to choose, which colour to place beside which, how much space a rose needed, and how much a chrysanthemum could bear to give up. The knowledge that was not thought, but reflex. The knowledge of a person who has done the same thing for long enough that it has become part of them. She thought about Eleanor Hartley often, not with urgency, not with the particular restlessness she had felt for 23 years when she thought about E. Hartley on the order card. Something calmer. The way you think about someone you have recently understood with the settled quality of a thing that has found its place. She had not written again after the Friday letter. She had thought about it several times and had decided against it each time, not because she had nothing to say, but because what had been said felt complete. 4 letters in a week, and then the silence of 2 people who have told each other what they needed to tell each other and are content to let it rest. The particular silence of a correspondence that has done its work. She thought about delivered, which she had written in the ledger, about the 23 delivery lines she had left blank before this one, about whether to go back and fill them in. She decided not to. The blank lines were honest. They said what they needed to say, not delivered to the address. That was true. It had always been true. And this year's delivered was also true, in a different and larger sense, and both things could stand in the ledger without contradicting each other. Truth, she had learned from 30 years of flowers, was not always one thing. She walked past Canning Lane on the Saturday. Not to knock. She had been clear with herself about that. She walked past it the way you walk past certain places once you know what they are, with a slight adjustment in your attention, a slight slowing of the pace, the awareness of what is there on the other side of the bricks and the net curtains and the dark blue door. It was a Saturday afternoon, the week before Christmas. The streets of Clerkenwell busy with the particular purposeful bustle of people who have things to do before the holiday and are doing them. The shops lit and warm. The stalls selling things that smelled of cinnamon and roasting nuts. The cold very clean and the sky very pale and the gas lamps already lit at 3 o'clock. Canning Lane was quieter than the surrounding streets. It always would be, she thought. The particular quiet of a residential street on a Saturday afternoon, the houses holding their warmth, the pavement empty. She walked the length of it, slowly, on the opposite pavement from number 14, the dark blue door, the brass knocker, the pot on the step. She saw now that it contained a small rosemary bush, clipped into shape, very dark and still. The net curtains, and behind them, in the left window, a lamp burning warm and amber, and beside the lamp, just visible through the gauze of the curtain, flowers. She stopped walking. She looked. She could not see clearly. The net curtains diffused everything, turned the interior of the room into something soft and impressionistic. But the flowers were there. Something pale, something white. Roses, she thought, in a vase on a table beside the lamp. Catching the lamplight, she stood on the pavement of Canning Lane and looked at the flowers in the window of number 14. She thought. She went out and bought her own. She thought. Of course she did. She stood for another moment, the cold settling around her, the lane very quiet, the lamplight warm behind the curtain, the pale flowers catching it. Then she walked on, back toward Clerkenwell Road, back toward the busy streets and the cinnamon smell and the lit shops. She walked back to Marchpane Lane. The last week before Christmas was the busiest of the year. She worked from 7 in the morning until 7 at night and came home tired, in the particular way of someone who has done work they are good at for a long time, not depleted but spent, the way a good fire is spent when it has burned properly and completely. She ate her supper and slept well and rose early and went back. The shop at this time of year had its own quality. The warmth of it against the cold outside, the smell of it more intense in December than any other month, the concentration of so many different flowers in a small, warm space, producing something that was not any one smell but all of them together, which was something else entirely. The window full and changing, the buckets dense with colour, the bell above the door constant. She loved it. She did not always remember to notice that she loved it. The December rush was too much to stand outside of and observe. You were inside it or you were not there at all. But this year, for reasons she did not entirely examine, she found herself noticing the particular amber of the lamplight at 4 o'clock, the weight of a good bunch of roses in both hands, the smell of the mimosa still on the shelf, a little of it left in the warm air of the back room. She noticed, and she was glad. On the 23rd she found the photograph. She had been clearing the top shelf of the back room, a shelf she rarely touched, where her mother had kept certain things that were not quite useful and not quite discardable. Old vases, a glass float she had always liked, several things whose original purpose was unclear. And at the very back, behind a stack of old order books, a small photograph in a paper frame. She brought it down and looked at it in the lamplight. A black and white photograph. A woman standing outside a shop, this shop. She recognized the bow window behind her. The woman, perhaps 30 years old, squinting slightly against what was probably sun, one hand resting on the doorframe. Dark hair, a white apron, a smile that was not quite a smile, but was close the expression of someone who has been asked to hold still for a photograph and has not quite managed to look natural. Her mother, younger than Nora had ever known her, younger than she appeared in any photograph Nora had seen before, standing outside the shop in the year it opened, perhaps. The first year, the year Francis Hartley had sent the first order. Nora stood in the back room with the photograph and looked at her mother's young face. She thought about new things finding each other in a city. Eleanor Hartley's phrase from the second letter. A new shop on Marchpane Lane. A new person at Calloway Street. Two new things in the same December, reaching toward each other across a city without knowing they were reaching. A flower order sent, a flower order received. The beginning of something that had now lasted 54 years and would, she thought, last longer. She set the photograph on the workbench. She would find a frame for it, a proper one, and she would put it somewhere in the shop where she could see it. Not as sentiment her mother would not have wanted sentiment, as information, as the answer to a question she had been carrying for 23 years without knowing quite how to phrase it. Who started this and why, and what was it for? A woman in a white apron standing outside her new shop in her first December. That was who, and the why was the same as it always was, because some things deserve to be continued. Christmas came and went quietly. She closed the shop on the 24th and reopened on the 27th. The days between she spent at home, doing the things she did when the shop was closed, reading, walking, the particular luxury of mornings without the 7 o'clock alarm. She thought about Eleanor Hartley in her house on Canning Lane, about whether she had people for Christmas or whether she spent it, as Nora spent it quietly, without ceremony, in the particular peace of a person who has made their arrangement with solitude and found it sufficient. She thought she might write in January, not about flowers, simply to say that she was there, that the shop was there, that the connection, whatever it was, continued. She thought Eleanor Hartley would probably write first. On the first Monday of the new year, she found a letter in the letterbox. Not the cream envelope, a different envelope, white, slightly larger, the handwriting on the front, different from Eleanor Hartley's, but familiar in its quality. The same compressed, careful letters, younger than Eleanor's, steadier, without the slight tremor of age. She stood at the door and looked at it. The return address on the back, 14 Canning Lane, Clerkenwell. She opened it. Dear Miss Ellison, my name is Margaret Hartley. I am Eleanor Hartley's granddaughter. My grandmother passed away on the 28th of December, peacefully and at home, as she had always wished. She had asked me to write to you when it happened. She said you would know what it meant. She also asked me to continue the order. She said that was very important, that the flowers were for the house, not for a person, and the house would still need them. I did not entirely understand what she meant. She said that was all right. She said understanding would come. She said it had come to her and to her mother before her, and that it would come to me too if I was patient. I will be patient. Please continue to make the arrangement. I will send the order every December as she did. Yours sincerely, Margaret Hartley. Nora read the letter standing in the doorway of the shop. The January morning cold and very clear. The lane quiet. The butcher's lights on across the way. The particular quality of a London morning in the first week of January, the city exhaling after Christmas, settling back into itself, resuming the long ordinary work of the year. She thought about Eleanor Hartley, 81 years old, gone now, peacefully and at home, the way she would have wanted. She thought about the order continuing. Margaret Hartley, Eleanor's granddaughter, sending the envelope every December. The same cream paper, perhaps? The same flowers? White roses, winter hyacinth, yellow mimosa. The understanding coming slowly, as Eleanor had promised, as it had come to Eleanor, as it had come in 1974 to Nora's mother, as it had come this December to Nora herself. She went behind the counter. She opened the ledger. She turned to the tab. She added a new slip at the front, this year's slip, the one with delivered written in the notes column. She put it at the front because it was the most recent, because it was the one that changed things, not resolved them exactly, changed them, deepened them, made them into something that could continue for another 54 years without requiring explanation. She took out a fresh piece of paper. She wrote, Dear Miss Hartley, thank you for writing. I am sorry for your loss. Your grandmother was a remarkable correspondent. I had the privilege of 4 letters from her in December, and I will keep them for a long time. She was right that understanding comes with patience. I have been making this arrangement for 23 years. An understanding came to me this December, and it was worth the wait. The order will be here every year. I will make it with care. I have always made it with care, and I always will. It is, I think, the best arrangement I make each year. Something about knowing what it is for makes the making of it different, better, more itself. Your grandmother said the flowers were for the house. I believe this entirely. I have been a florist for 30 years, and I know that flowers do things that are difficult to explain. The house at 14 Canning Lane has been receiving white roses and winter hyacinth and yellow mimosa every December for 55 years now, counting this one. Whatever that does to a house, it has been doing it for a very long time. I expect it will continue to do it. She paused. Then she added, "Your grandmother mentioned that the mimosa was the most important part, and that you disagreed she thought the hyacinth was. I have been thinking about this since she told me. I believe they are both right, which was also what I told her. But I also think there may be a third answer. I think the most important part is the making of it, the care that goes into something you believe in. That is what has been going into this arrangement for 55 years, and I think that is what the house receives, year after year, whether the flowers arrive or not. Yours sincerely, Nora, Ellison." She folded the letter, addressed it, set it with the post. Then she went to the flower buckets and began the work of the day. It was January now, the quietest month, the month when the shop exhaled after Christmas and settled into something slower and more considered. Fewer orders, more time with each one. The wholesaler deliveries back to twice a week. The window displays simpler, the concentrated richness of December giving way to something quieter. Snowdrops, which she loved. Early narcissus. The first signs of what was coming, very tentative, very certain. She put her mother's photograph on the wall beside the workbench, in a plain wooden frame she had found in the back room. Her mother young and squinting in front of the bow window in the shop's first December. The year Francis Hartley sent the first envelope. The year everything that was now 55 years old had been new. She looked at the photograph every morning when she came in. She thought, "Hello, Mum. The flowers this year were good." On the first Monday of February, she received a letter from Margaret Hartley. Brief, the handwriting more settled now than in the January letter. The handwriting of someone who has had a month to begin the settling. "Dear Miss Ellison, thank you for your letter. I have been thinking about what you said, that the most important part is the making of it. I think you are right. I think my grandmother knew this, which is why she continued the order even when the delivery could not be completed. She was making something. You were making something. The house was receiving something. The address was almost beside the point. I have been visiting the house, sorting through things. It is a long task. She lived there for 60 years and she kept a great deal. But the house feels I am not certain of the word. Tended. It feels tended. Even now that she is gone, I think perhaps this is what she meant. I look forward to December. Yours sincerely, Margaret Hartley." Nora read the letter and set it with the others. 5 letters now, 4 from Eleanor, 1 from Margaret, the beginning of something, or the continuation of something. She was not certain which, and thought perhaps it did not matter. The house feels tended. She thought about white roses and winter hyacinth and yellow mimosa, about the making of them year after year in the back room of a flower shop on a narrow London lane, about a house receiving something it could not quite name, about the care that goes into something you believe in and the way that care goes somewhere even when you cannot see where. She thought, 11 months until December. She thought this without impatience. 11 months was not a long time, not measured against 55 years, not measured against a December order that had been arriving in the same handwriting since her mother was young and squinting in front of a bow window in the first winter of the shop. She went to the flower buckets. She selected the snowdrops for the window display, small and white and very early. The first thing, the thing that came before everything else. She carried them to the workbench. She began. Outside, the February morning was grey and cold and committed to itself. The lane quiet, the butcher across the way, the lamp in the bow window casting its amber circle onto the pavement. The ordinary morning of an ordinary street in winter. Inside the shop was warm, the flowers in their buckets, the smell of the back room, the photograph on the wall, the letters on the shelf, the ledger with its tab and its 55 slips and the word delivered written at last in the delivery column of the most recent one. Nora worked at the bench, the snowdrops between her hands, the day beginning, the year beginning, the slow, unhurried movement toward the next December when the envelope would come through the letterbox on the first Monday of the month. The same cream paper, the same flowers, a younger hand now but the same intention, the same care, the same house at the end of it, receiving what it had always received. The bell above the door, a customer, something for a birthday, nothing too formal. Something warm. Nora set down the snowdrops and went to help. The shop did what it did. The morning did what it did. The flowers in their buckets waited with the patience that flowers have, which is complete, which is entire, which is the patience of things that know their purpose and are content to wait for the right moment to fulfill it. Outside the lane was very quiet. Inside the shop was warm and fragrant and entirely itself, as it had always been, as it would be, when December came again, and the envelope came through the letterbox, and Nora went to the flower buckets and began.